Hey everyone. So today we have some CSS interview question that I want to explain to you. So it will be helpful in your interview. So let's get started. So the first question that I have is, what does CSS stand for? So the CSS means that cascading style sheet. So it is a language that we use to decorate or style your web page, right? So you can define how your web page, how your HTML page will look on a browser, right? So this is what CSS stand for. The next question that I have is, how do you add CSS to an HTML page? So there are mainly three ways that we have to add CSS to the HTML. So the first is inline, second is internal, third is external. So in inline style, the way we write inline style is like you can use a style attribute to HTML element and give whatever style that you want inside it. Like let's say we have a div and we want to give the inline style to this. So we will use a style attribute and equal to and the double quotes and give whatever that you want to that element, like define color or background color or display anything that you want. You can defined there by separating all by comma, right? Comma or semicolon, I think. So this is the inline style. The second is internal. So in an internal way, we define all the style in a style tag, right? In a style tag, and then we put this style tag in the head of a HTML page. So this is the internal style. The third way is internal. Okay, sorry, external. So in external way, uh, we define all the style in a different file, right? Uh, and then we link that file to the required web HTML page, right? So this is the third way. We use this external way when you have a large HTML file, right? You have a very large file, and if you, let's say, if you give the style inside the same file, then it will not look elegant. It will be very long. It will make even longer, right? So then we use external way. So this is the answer for this particular questions. Now move to the next question. What are CSS selector? So you can, as the name suggests, it is a way that you can select an HTML element, right? You can select or find HTML element of HTML page and give and you can apply the style to it. So there are mainly five ways that we use to select CSS HTML element. So the first is type selector. So in type selector, we can select any element, right? You can also say type selector as a element selector, right? You can select an element, like you have a div and select that div and give the a style to it, right? Whatever style that you want, color, background, or display, or anything that you want to apply to that div, right? So the second is class selector. So in class selector, the way we use this is first we define a class attribute to that particular element, right? That particular element, and then we uh, select that CSS uh, and give this style. The way we select that is like you write dot operator and then the class name, and then inside the curly braces define the style. Like this is the way we use class. The next come is ID. So in ID selector it is same as a class. In ID selector you also do the same, like you define a ID attribute to uh, element, right? Element, or you can say tag, and you select that ID by using hash symbol and the ID name, and inside the curly braces define the style that you want. So there are difference between there is a main difference that I can say is you can use same class name to different or multiple uh, element, right? You can define the same class name to different element, but you cannot do with the ID selector. As you can also think is like ID is unique, like you cannot have multiple ID. So in your school everyone has one ID, right? You can remember. So ID, you cannot have a multiple ID to different or more than one student. So same as there it is also in this CSS. So the next is universal selector. So in universal selector we can give like we use this selector when you want to style or apply a style to each and every element, right? When you want to apply the same style to each or every element of the web page, right? So then we use universal selector. The symbol for this is asterisk, right? And in the curly braces you define the style. So where I was, yeah. The next comes is attribute selector. So this is also a way we can select element, right? In attribute selector we can select element based on its attribute. Let's say we have an anchor tag, and in we have defined a href or given a link, right? So you can also select that by writing like this a and the big bracket and give the href here. This way you can select this, or let's say you have a multiple anchor tag, right? So you cannot give like this. You can write like let me take my pen, and you can uh, let's say you have a unique link, so you can write here that link, right? So this is the way we can select or what we can say attribute. Or let's say you can also select a link that start with some letter like https or like this, but you have to write asterisk sign before the equal to sign, or if you want to select a link that end with some word, then you can use a dollar sign here. So this is a way we can uh, use to select attribute, right? So this is the way. Let me erase all the drawing. So the next comes is combinator selector. So in combinator selector, as the name suggests, you can combine multiple selector. You can select element and based on multiple selector, like we have a general selector, like uh, general selector, or child selector, or what we have, adjacent child selector. So these are the way that we can use. So like, let's say we have a div, and inside this parent div we have anchor tag, right? So in this way, this is you can select that select that anchor tag. So you can define like that this, or let's say we have a div, and there is one more anchor tag, that is sibling, right? Adjacent sibling. So you can also select that by writing greater than sign, then it will select the adjacent anchor, right? It will not select this, it will select adjacent. But if you want to select general sibling, then you can use this symbol, right? So these are the way we have to use combinator selector. Now the pseudo selector. So in pseudo selector, uh, you can uh, select the selector that you want to style uh, a specific, like you can select the element and give the style to a specific part, right? So let's say we have we let's say we want to a style, give the style after a div, right? Then you use this element selector, like we have after or before, like we use it like this. Let's say we have a div, and after this div we want to give some content. So we have one after keyword, and div here. First you write div, and then this way, and define the content here, right? Whatever you will write here, it will apply just after this uh, element. So this is the way. Next comes is pseudo selector. So in pseudo selector you can style your element on a specific state, right? Let's say when you, or when a user hover on it, or when a link is visited or unvisited link, like you can define a style to it. Like let's say we have a link, and we want its color to be white when a user is not clicked on it. So we can define that style. Or let's say on the same style, when it is clicked, then you want to give the color different, then you can use this selector. So like we can select this like anchor and then visited, right? I'm not good with this uh, mouse. by writing mouse. And let's say unvested, so you can also define some other color. We have a multiple pseudo selector. I cannot discuss here, right? So now come on the next. So let me erase all the drawing. Now, what are CSS variables? So it is a function that you can use to uh, define the select, what we can say, define the CSS variable. It is a function that you can use to define a CSS variable. Let's say, you have already know this. You already use this, like uh, you I know you have used this, like you have given the same color to multiple selector, right? You have just copy paste the same color code or color name again and again, but you can avoid that by using the CSS variable. You can define uh, a variable, declare a variable with some name and give the value, and you can use that variable name whenever you want. So you can see here what I have, how I have defined. So I have given a key name, like key name blue, and I can, whenever we want the blue color, then I just will write this name, and it will apply the this color code to that particular element, right? So this is the CSS selector. So the next comes is, what is the difference between position absolute and relative? So when you use CSS relative, then it places your element from its normal position, or you can say the current position, right? And it will not change the layout. The changing the layout, I mean, it will not leave the current position. When you use relative, you can see in the second picture, I have used relative, but when I used relative, it is not leaving the current position, even if it is moved to the new position, right? It has still taken the current position, right? But when you use your position as absolute, then it will place your element from its nearest parent, right? It will place your element relative to your nearest parent position, right? And it will change the layout of the page, right? So it the what I mean by changing the layout, so when you use position absolute, then leave it will leave the current position as well, right? You can see here that the current position was here at the tree position, but when I use absolute, it left that particular place, and it has moved to its nearest parent, right? So it is not taking the previous position. So you can see the difference here. In relative, it has taken the space, but in absolute, it has not uh, taken the previous position or place. Uh, the previous position is replaced by some another element, right? So this is the difference between position, absolute and relative. So next comes is what is the difference between flex and grid? So the main difference that I can say is flex is used for 1D directional and grid is used for 2D directional. Uh, Means flex, you can use flex property when you want to align your content in either row or either column, right? You can define in only one direction, either row or column. But when you use grid, you can align your items, or you can align your element in both direction. You can align the element in both row as well as column. So this is the main difference between these two. Now let's move to the next question. What is a specificity and how you calculate it? So a specificity is, you can think it as a priority that a browser has given to each selector, right? So how browser will apply the defined CSS that you have added. So they have given each selector a value, right? They have given a value to each selector, and based on that value, browser will apply those styles. So the inline style has higher specificity, or you can say priority. So, and then comes the ID selector. Then the third is class or the pseudo class or attribute selector. And the last priority that browser give is the tag, or the, what you can say, the element selector or pseudo element selector. So this is the specificity. Now comes on the what is the purpose of alt attribute on image. So the main purpose of alt attribute in image is like when your user is not capable of viewing that image, then that alternative text will be appeared on their screen. Let's say I have defined a given attribute in a image, right? But due to some reason that image link break, right? So then user will not be able to see that, but user will wonder what was there in that place, right? On that particular web page. Uh, for that region, we give the alternative information about that image, like user cannot view it right now, but if we give the alt attribute, and then user will know that there was a image there, but due to some reason it is now right now not visible, right? So this is the purpose of alt attribute. Now move on the media query. So media query, you can you use this uh, in your CSS to define the uh, what you can say, you can define multiple, or you can define different style to different screen sizes, right? So it is used for mainly making page responsive. So you can define multiple you can define completely different style or layout to different screen sizes, right? So let's say I have one website, and we want to show this website different on mobile or a browser, or laptop or tablet or any bigger screens. So you use this media query and define how your page will look in these screen sizes. So this is the way that we this is the purpose of media query. So let's move on the next question. So the next question is the difference between min width and max width in media query. So in when we use media query, then we give the min width and max width, right? Then it will apply those styles based on this width that you have provided. So when you use min width, then those style will apply to browser that has viewport equal to or greater than that width, right? So let's say I have given uh, a min width of 8 pixel, as you can see on the screen. So the style that we put in the curly braces will apply to the browser that has view width or width, you can say, equal to 8 pixel 800 pixel or greater than 800 pixel, right? So this is the mean width. Now move to max width. So in max width, the styles that we will define in the curly braces will apply to the browser that has viewport equal to or less than that viewport, right? Let's say I have defined the same value 800 pixel in the max width. So the style will apply to the browser that has viewport 800 pixel equal to 800 pixel or lesser than that uh, that 800 pixel, right? So this is the main difference between these two. I think I have reached to the end of this slide. So I will come with new questions later. So that's it for this video. Thanks.